Well, I once took a class in college where our assignment was to create a dramatic screenplay. That's what I majored in college, how to write screenplays. So we had already been taught the basics about things like plot structure for any good story. And it goes like this. You have a hero, and the hero gets stuck up in a tree, or metaphorically speaking, stuck up in a tree, where people might even throw rocks at the hero, and the hero then figures out a way to get out of the tree. Hooray! The end. That seriously is the basic plot point of every story ever told, any novel ever written, any movie or TV show ever made, because humans absolutely love that story. So our assignment in that class was simply to write our own version of that. Well, one day in class, a student raised his hand and he confessed to the professor that he was just stuck. He tried lots of ideas but just could not figure out a scenario that seemed to work. So the professor, she stared at him for a while and then she said, "Make your story take place on the water." And the student said, "On the water?" The professor said, "Water is a universal human fear. So put your hero on a boat out in the middle of the ocean. If you can't use water, you can't pass this class." And in that instant, it was as if that student had been struck by lightning. He began furiously scribbling down ideas, and the rest of us in the class just looked at each other, and because we were also stuck, but we didn't have the guts to admit it, we all had the same thought instantaneously. Water! Of course! So when we all turned in our screenplays, we had to read them out loud for everyone. Every last one of them took place on a body of water. Mine was about a guy paddling down a remote river in a canoe, trying to outrun dangerous Scotsmen playing bagpipes. Because dangerous hillbillies playing banjos, that had already been taken. And, bagpipes are scarier than banjos. Everyone knows that. Well, it's true about water. In every ancient culture, and from the very first sentences of the Bible, water is a dangerous and mysterious element. Land is safe and predictable, but water is frightening and unpredictable. So for a dramatic story, putting your hero out on the water always works. The hero can only win the day by conquering that natural fear. And that helps explain why we find the disciples of Jesus out on the water. The story ups the ante by having wind and waves battering the small fishing boat. And when the disciples see Jesus walking across the water toward them, what does Jesus say? He says, "Hey, it's me. Don't be afraid." And when Peter steps out of the boat to try this first century version of windsurfing, why does he start to sink? He's afraid. When they all get back in the boat and the wind and the waves settle down, the disciples understand that their friend and leader, Jesus, just might be someone really special. He has command over the elements. He has control over the very thing that frightens them, over the very thing that storytellers from time beyond memory and storytellers even today continue to use to represent our deepest fears. So, Jesus hasn't just walked on water and calmed the storm. Jesus has overcome fear itself. Now, like anything in the Bible, this story is not there by accident. It wouldn't be long before the followers of Jesus would be facing even more fearful situations. Jesus would be arrested and executed, and even after they experienced the resurrected Christ, pretty soon the disciples would be left to their own devices. They were charged with carrying out the mission of spreading the story of God's love, but in a world that was very hostile to their ideas. For any normal person, that would be a fearful thing. Now, you and I have our own set of fears, and we live in a much different time and place. But let's think about what this story says about the nature of fear and how fear is overcome. Now, the reason why The story structure of the hero getting into trouble resonates so deeply with us, whether it's being caught up in a tree or stuck out on the water, is because we all know how that feels. If we're the hero of our own story, we've all had moments when we've been in perilous situations, and so we either sit tight and we hope to be rescued, or we have to figure out how to rescue ourselves. That basic story plot line is our basic plot line. Now, you've probably heard of fire walking. Maybe you've even gone through a fire walking ritual yourself. So a bunch of wood is laid down on a path. It's about 15 yards long, and it's burned down until it becomes glowing red hot coals. And with your bare feet, you gingerly walk across it. On the other end, your feet are somehow not burned. Crazy, right? It's actually an ancient ritual that became a popular thing in the US back in the 1970s. You could pay lots of money to attend a retreat to discover yourself, and a fire walk would be set up as a way of demonstrating that you could conquer your fears, mind over matter. And for a lot of folks, fire walking was a profound spiritual experience. It seemed impossible that they had done it. Now, of course, surviving a fire walk with your feet unsinged, that's actually a simple matter of physics. The wood coals, they're just not very good conductors of heat, and your feet are constantly moving as you walk, so you're not touching the coals long enough for the heat to hurt you in any way. Scientifically, that's how it works. At the same time as an exercise, it is scary. It's still true that for any sane person, stepping out onto hot coals requires you to take any fear you have about that and believe that what seems impossible is doable, which is another way of saying that you have faith. And that's why it can be a spiritual experience. Now, fire walking is a voluntary thing. And most of the time, when we find ourselves stuck up a tree, it's not our choice to be up in a tree in the first place. None of us volunteers to be diagnosed with a serious illness or to be in the middle of an ugly family fight where people we love are choosing up sides and putting us in a no-win situation. But firewalking can teach us something important about fear and the power of having faith. Even if we know about the physics of firewalking, we're still placing our faith in the laws of physics. It's still scary. It's still taking a step into something that's potentially dangerous, but doing it anyway. So that means that fear is perfectly normal, even if you know the odds. Faith is not the absence of fear. Faith is acknowledging fear, but going ahead and believing that walking through it matters more than standing still. After all, not moving, being paralyzed, not stepping out of the boat, or being distracted by all the elements, that is when fear wins. So fear is what causes us to stay put rather than move forward. It might feel safer to do nothing, but the truth is, if you keep doing what you're always doing, you will keep getting what you're always getting. You're still going to be up that tree. And fear can really play a number on our heads. We might be afraid to the extent that our fear begins to take over our rational thought process. So we end up responding in ways that are not very helpful. It can even become a group phenomenon. I've seen that a lot lately, and what appear to be instances of otherwise sane people behaving very poorly. You've probably seen all the videos that have gone viral showing people throwing wall-eyed fits because someone simply asked them to wear a face mask. It's clear that the extreme anger on display is the result of fear. The fear that their personal rights are being taken away, that the orderly life they've constructed is being challenged, that the world as they expect it to be has changed without their permission. So something as simple as being asked to protect your health and, and their own health, it's understood as a disruption to their sense of security. What seems to me to be lacking in those cases is faith. Faith that what science and common sense and the entire medical community is suggesting is true and is not some malicious plot. It's a lack of faith that we can trust each other when bad things happen, even a pandemic. Getting to this point, where people seem to have lost faith in each other, that can be frightening in itself. It's discouraging and it's scary to see folks who are peacefully marching for racial justice, for instance, met by militia groups carrying automatic weapons. What is it those militia groups fear? That black people will finally enjoy all the rights and privileges of citizenship? That they'll benefit economically? They'll be treated fairly by our justice system? Again, it is a fear-based lack of faith. Faith that all the systemic changes that must happen to provide racial justice will actually be good for everyone. But fear is always a powerful motivator. It motivates you to resist change, to stay stuck up in that tree. Fear closes in on you and tells you that true safety and security is found in not moving forward into a promised future, but it's by preserving and holding on tightly to the status quo. Fear that things are not possible. But there's a reason that that's never a good plot line for any story. It's not a good story for any person or any society because it's lacking in faith. And we need faith. The faith that even though the world can be scary and challenging and it's always changing, that we can trust each other in the goodness of each other, and the decency in each other, and the loving heart that beats in each other. We can have faith because staying stuck is not the story that we have been created to live. When the frightened disciples stuck in that boat saw Jesus walking across the water toward them that day, and when the wind and the waves calmed down, when their fear went away, and they recognized that Jesus was someone truly special, did they think that they had been rescued? Or did they understand that their fear had been just that? Fear. They'd been frightened, as any of us might be, by all the elements battering their boat. But what Jesus represented was never about staying in the boat. Jesus was never about staying put, where things appear to be safer and more secure. Jesus knew that wind and waves are part and parcel of living, and that those things are certainly frightening. But he also knew that to move forward with our story, we've got to have more faith than fear. We have to be able to look at the wind and the waves, and as fearful as they may be, have faith to step out anyway. What does he say? Don't be afraid. Look, it's me. Me. The one who embodies justice and healing and kindness and wisdom and self-giving love. The one who teaches and demonstrates that treating and trusting and loving others in the way we need to be treated and trusted and loved is how we were made to live together. That's the story we're born to live out. Now, it takes faith for that to happen, for fear to be overcome. And I have faith that will be our story, and we will overcome.